Is this good or bad for boxing? Dana White has recently announced a brand new boxing league in partnership with the funding of Saudi Arabia and Turki Alalshikh that is set to be shaped like the UFC and will hugely change the game. So this is why and how Dana White will change boxing forever.
The TKO boxing promotion is definitely going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. You got two huge forces of Dana White and Turki Alalshikh coming together, looking to put on some of the best fights in boxing. And it's definitely going to shake up the game for good, for bad, or for the mix of it, to be honest. Dana White is looking to bring a UFC sort of model into boxing to try to disrupt the landscape and create a more consistent model that will be able to last for longer and not just be a going out of sale type of card for each event. It's going to be interesting to see a promotion that's only going to be carrying one title for each division. And honestly, I think for the most part, this would be a very welcome addition, as in boxing these days, you see just so many belts in divisions. And honestly, there's so many champions to the point where at times it doesn't fully make sense and they just create belts for different events that is not even worthy for. So there's definitely a lot of good aspects they can add here. But for sure, there will be questions on maybe some of the pay, how much the fighters are going to be taking home from each event, as the UFC to this day is criticized on how much money some of the top guys are being made. And look, it's not like it's perfect in boxing right now. It's a lot favored to the top guys. The unknown fighters on cards are not making a lot of money and a lot less than their UFC counterparts at the similar level. When you look at a Canelo or the star level of a Tyson Fury and how much crazy money they make in boxing compared to their UFC counterparts like a John Jones or even a Conor McGregor, for how much value he's really worth, he definitely makes a lot less in comparison. So it will be a wonder how they're going to adjust this model into boxing.
Yeah, not only does it look like they're going to be making their own promotion with the funding of Saudi Arabia, this could be massive, and this could be kind of the scheme that Turki Alalshikh has kind of been planning all along to really save the sport, at least for the fans. For so long in boxing, we've been asking for the best to fight the best, and that really hasn't happened up until Riyadh season and Saudi Arabia coming in and really making these fights that people have wanted to see for years. The Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk fights, the Dmitry Bivol versus Artur Beterbiev fights, all these massive mega fights with stacked undercards. You don't usually see that in boxing. Usually it's very top heavy, just the main event people tune in for. For example, Tank versus Roach. Sure, there were some names on the undercard like Gary Antoine Russell and Rayo Valenzuela, but other than that, there's just not much substance to these undercards of the like of PBC, DAZN. It's not mutually exclusive to anyone. It's kind of just general boxing cards. None of them are really stacked. None of them people really care about, but Turkey has kind of made it so the best are fighting the best. We're getting stacked cards. The pacing of events are getting a little bit better, and that's been a huge criticism in boxing for so many years. The pacing of these events are so slow. You have entire podcasts in between fights. You have commentators just rambling and yapping to fill airtime, to fill space. In the UFC, you just get fight after fight after fight after fight, and that's what the audience wants. That's what they came there for. That's what they're watching. It's what they're tuning in for, to see fights. And boxing just doesn't do a great job of the pacing. It's very outdated. The press conferences, all the kind of lead up and promotion, it is very different to the UFC model, and I feel like change is definitely very welcome in my opinion. I feel like boxing has kind of been stuck in this old school mindset for a while, not really wanting to change its ways with these 4 belts. Obviously, the fighters do want to fight for these big belts that have a lot of history, a lot of background. All these world champions have fought for in the past, but it seems like they're getting the Ring Magazine belt to be fought for on this TKO boxing promotion, whatever that's going to be called. And it's not like the ring doesn't have lineage. Like Muhammad Ali fought for it, Rocky Marciano fought for it. It was won by like Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk in this era. So the Ring Magazine belt is still a big deal in boxing. The best champions do want to have that belt as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how they really approach this. What happens to promoters? How long would it take for this to really get established? Because this isn't just going to happen overnight. We're not just going to see an entire new boxing promotion just take over, and all these other promoters who've been doing it their entire lives, and all these fighters and all these promotions and all these networks are just going to disappear overnight. That's not going to happen. It's going to be a slow build, a slow process, but if they're able to do what does seem possible, it looks like they're about to get the backing of Netflix and try to put on massive massive fights, starting with a potential Terence Crawford versus Canelo Alvarez fight, maybe on Netflix. Then they want to get Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury. This whole thing can just be massive, and regardless of whether you think it's good or bad for the sport, things are going to change and things are definitely going to look different.
Yeah, for sure. The Netflix edition would definitely be a massive change in general. There's even a potential of the coveted pay-per-view model being changed or maybe just adjust with, as Netflix of course uses the subscriptions. We've seen DAZN as well try that strategy in the past. Nowadays they also have their pay-per-views and it's not just purely subscription based. But with the backing of Netflix plus Turki Alalshikh, there's at least a possibility of sustainable change there, and even more changing into a UFC type of model. They have said there is going to be significantly less weight classes than we see in boxing, very similar to the UFC. As in boxing, there are so many different weight classes, especially for some of the smaller guys, in which elite fighters are fighting in these divisions and kind of rule over, such as Bam Bam, Inoue, Tank Davis. And with this change being added to this UFC style for boxing, it will be a wonder how they're going to be able to match together some of these smaller guys in a similar weight class, how difficult it's going to be for them to make weight for that weight class and try to adjust to that sort of format. So definitely with all these positives, there are some criticisms and some things to look out for. There are some additional things such as Dana White and for the TKO promotion, it seems like they don't want the Ali Act and to incorporate this, as fighters won't be able to bid themselves out to the highest auction for massive fights and will be forced to stay in the promotion and essentially locked to a contract. In boxing, we see this operate as the best fighters, the biggest fighters, having the capability to make additional money and maximize their potential profits from a massive fight. But if this is added to this TKO promotion, it will definitely add a lot of criticism as to potential fighters being trapped in their contract, not being able to seek if there is higher potential for more money out there than in their current contract. So that's definitely one of the bigger criticisms that might be out there for this new promotion.
Personally, I'm interested to see the approach of fighter pay, because that's really one of the main criticisms of the UFC in general, that they really don't pay their athletes, and that's really to do with the percentage split of what goes to the company and the networks and then what goes to the fighters. It is a very low split in the UFC, and I don't want to throw around the word monopoly, but the UFC does have a very tight grip on the sport of MMA as a whole. It is by far the biggest MMA promotion, but that didn't happen overnight. They bought different promotions, they had to fight their way up the rankings, and that's going to be the same here. It's not just going to be an overnight thing, and it's going to be really hard to monopolize a sport like boxing that's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, that's had tons of different promotions, networks, everything of the like involved. Now we have even Amazon Prime and Netflix trying to get their hands on these boxing events, and Netflix already did one event with Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. Now they're putting on another one in the summer with Amanda Serrano versus Katie Taylor, 3 of the trilogy. So they're already getting their feet wet with the boxing events. It seems like TKO and even potentially the UFC could strike a deal with Netflix. You've even seen Jake Paul rant on Twitter talking about how I was the first to do this, everyone's following my lead and I set the trends. So it seems like he's not too happy that Dana White's probably going to be hosting events on Netflix, and massive ones at that. If they get Canelo versus Crawford on their first event, that would be unprecedented. That would be massive. One of the biggest fights of the year, if not the biggest fight of the year. I don't know what would top that. Then they're looking at Tyson Fury versus AJ. They're looking at some massive big fights to really start this promotion. But I'm interested to see how they build fighters, how they sign fighters. They do have this one guy that's been fighting on UFC Fight Pass, which is King Callum Walsh. He recently got a first round knockout, and Dana White's been getting behind this guy, trying to market him as a next upcoming undefeated Irish superstar in boxing. But so far to the casual audience, he isn't too well known. He isn't that big of a name. So they're going to need to put these guys on the undercards of these massive events to build them up. And with the funding of Saudi Arabia, with the funding of Turki Alalshikh, and with the connections that Turkey has with all the promoters in the game, with all the big fighters, it might even be easier than we think for this TKO thing to really get started and to really make a wave, make a splash. This is going to be massive for boxing, and hopefully it is a good thing. Hopefully this works out for all parties. Hopefully the fighters get paid, and hopefully we actually do see the best fight the best on a consistent basis, and we're always getting the big fights that we want to see, and it doesn't only just come down to some billionaires that just want to throw money at the sport even though they're not profiting off of any of these events. If they make a profitable business model that everyone wins in, that would ultimately be the best case scenario for the fans, the fighters, the promoters, and everyone. So who knows if that specifically is going to happen. That is kind of wishful thinking and probably not too likely. Someone's probably going to end up losing. But overall, this is going to be a massive change to the sport. This is going to shake things up. Less weight classes, less titles, less belts, less confusion, at least in this specific promotion. Will it transfer to the actual sport itself? Who knows? Because it's not like these sanctioning bodies are just going to go to sleep overnight. They're just going to not exist one day. Like, they're still going to be doing everything they can to stay in business, to stay in the spotlight, and to stay putting on fights. There's going to be some outliers. There's going to be some guys who don't sign and don't care about this promotion, and that's going to be interesting to see what all goes down. Overall, there's just some big news and a big deal for the sport of boxing as a whole. You know, if Dana White's getting into boxing, there's a reason for that. He hasn't for so many years. He's been talking about it for so many years, but finally, this is the time he's doing it, and he does things to become the best, to become a dominant force. So if he didn't think that he could do the same thing that he did with the UFC in boxing, I don't think he would have made this move. So I feel like some big things are going to happen in the next couple of years, and it's going to be interesting to see how things turn out.
But let us know down below if you think Dana White is going to make a big splash into the boxing world. And if you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and click the video on the screen of the destructive downfall of Joe Joyce.